Something is happening right now to someone who felt completely safe about an hour ago, in their own home, in the place they know best, the place they stopped checking because they decided nothing could go wrong there. You're watching the Nightmares Index. If you're new here, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss any of our uploads. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell me where in the world you are watching from and what time it is on your clock right now. All right. Story 1. I am running through my own backyard in the dark, and I don't know where he went. That is the only thought in my head. Where did he go? Where did he go? Where did he go? And my feet are hitting grass, and my hands are out in front of me, and somewhere behind me is the back door I left open, and somewhere ahead of me is the fence, and somewhere between those 2 points is a man I just watched disappear into the shadows of my own property. 30 seconds ago, I was standing in my kitchen. I need to slow down. I need to tell you how this started, because the ending doesn't make sense without the middle, and the middle doesn't make sense without understanding that I had been hunting this person for 6 days before I ever saw his face. It started with the shed door, June 8th, 2023, a Saturday. I went out to grab the lawnmower and found the shed door standing open about 4 inches. I hadn't been in there since the previous weekend. I live alone. No one else has a key. I checked inside. Nothing missing, nothing moved, nothing obviously wrong. I closed the door, made a mental note to check the latch mechanism, and forgot about it. June 10th. The door was open again. This time I checked the latch. It was fine. I checked the frame. Fine. I closed the door, wedged a brick against the bottom, and went to bed thinking about raccoons. June 11th. The brick had been moved. The door was open, and sitting on my lawnmower seat, placed there deliberately, centered, impossible to miss, was an orange. A single orange from the fruit bowl I kept on my kitchen counter. I need you to understand the geography here. My kitchen is inside my house. The fruit bowl is on the counter next to the refrigerator. To get an orange from that bowl and place it in my shed, a person would have to enter my home, walk through my living room, take something from my kitchen, exit through either the front or back door, cross my yard, and enter the shed. While I was home, while I was sleeping 40 feet away. I called the police. They came, they took a report, they walked the perimeter. They found no signs of forced entry. They suggested I install cameras. They left. I did not sleep that night. June 12th through 14th, I installed 4 cameras. 1 on the front porch, 1 on the back porch, 1 covering the side gate, 1 aimed directly at the shed. Motion activated, night vision, cloud storage. I watched the feeds obsessively. I checked them every hour. I woke up at 3 a.m. to review the overnight footage. Nothing. No movement. No alerts. No figure approaching the shed. But on the morning of June 14th, the door was open again. And this time, there was something written on the inside of the door in black marker. 2 words. Still here. The cameras had recorded nothing. 8 hours of footage, motion sensor active, and not a single frame showed anyone approaching that shed. I rewound. I watched at half speed. I watched frame by frame. The door was closed at 11:47 p.m. The door was open at 6:15 a.m. At no point in between did anything trigger the motion sensor. I stopped sleeping in my bedroom. I started sleeping on the couch in the living room, facing the back door, with a baseball bat next to me and my phone in my hand. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself there was an explanation. I told myself that whoever was doing this wanted to scare me, and if I just waited long enough, they would get bored and move on. On June 16th, at 2:34 a.m., I saw him. I was lying on the couch, not sleeping, watching the back door through half-closed eyes, when movement in the yard caught my attention. I sat up slowly. I looked through the glass. There was a man standing next to my shed. He was facing the house, facing me. And even in the dark, even from 40 feet away, I could tell he knew I was looking at him. He didn't run. He smiled. And then he opened the shed door and stepped inside. Here is where I made my choice. I could have called the police. I could have locked every door and waited in my living room with 911 on the line and let someone else handle what was happening in my yard. That was the smart move. That was the move every person I've told this story to says they would have made. But here's what they don't understand. He had been in my house. He had walked through my rooms while I slept. He had touched my things, taken something from my kitchen, and left it in my shed like a message. And every night for a week, while I lay awake checking cameras and jumping at sounds, he had been out there, watching, waiting, smiling in the dark. The police would come and find nothing. They would file another report. They would leave, and he would still be out there, still watching, still waiting, still smiling. So I ask you, not as a hypothetical, not as a thought experiment, I ask you as someone who lived through that moment, what would you have done? Stayed inside? Or ended it yourself? I grabbed the bat. I unlocked the back door. I stepped onto the porch and shouted into the dark. Something about police, something about a weapon, and something that was supposed to sound like authority, but came out as fear, wearing a mask of anger. The shed door swung open. He came out fast, not running, walking, but fast, covering ground with long strides, moving directly toward me, and I could see now that he was tall, over 6 feet, wearing dark clothing, and his hands were empty. But that didn't make me feel better, because his hands being empty meant he didn't need a weapon. I raised the bat. He stopped. 15 feet between us. The silence in that moment was the loudest thing I have ever heard. No insects, no traffic, no dogs barking. Just my breathing and his breathing and the space between us that suddenly felt like nothing at all. He said something. I don't want to repeat what he said. I have told the police. I have told the detective assigned to my case. But I am not going to say those words out loud again, because every time I do, I hear them in his voice, and I cannot do that anymore. What I will tell you is that after he spoke, he turned. Not toward the fence, not toward the side gate. He turned toward the corner of my yard, the corner where the fence meets the house, where the shadows are deepest, where my cameras have a blind spot I didn't know existed until that moment. And he walked into that shadow. And he did not come out. I ran after him. That's what I was doing at the beginning of this story, running through my own backyard in the dark, chasing a man into a corner that should have been a dead end. The fence is 7 feet high. The house wall is brick. There was nowhere for him to go. But when I reached that corner, bat raised, chest heaving, ready for whatever was waiting, there was nothing. Empty space. No one. I searched for 20 minutes. I climbed the fence and checked my neighbor's yard. I checked behind every shrub, every planter, every shadow on my property. He was gone. The police found nothing. The cameras recorded nothing after he entered the shed. Not his exit, not his approach toward me, not his disappearance into the corner. I have not seen him since. That was 9 months ago. I still live in that house. I don't know why. Maybe because leaving would mean he won. Maybe because I need to believe he is gone and staying proves that I believe it. But every night before I go to sleep, I check the shed door. And every night, I stand at my back window and watch that corner for as long as I can keep my eyes open. The last thing I saw before I lost him in that shadow was his face, turning back toward me for just a moment. He was still smiling. That was not the only time something like this was documented in a place like that. The next account happened in a different state, a different year, a different family entirely. But the pattern was the same. Objects appearing where they shouldn't be, a presence at the edge of the property, a feeling that something had been watching long before anyone noticed. And then, one night, everything accelerated. Story 2. I used to be the kind of person who knew my neighbors. I used to wave when I pulled into my driveway, stop to chat about weather and sports and property taxes, accept packages when they weren't home, and leave notes when their garbage cans blew over. I was that neighbor, the dependable one, the one who noticed things. Now I am the neighbor who saw what happened to the family next door on September 3rd, 2021, and did nothing to stop it. I did nothing because there was nothing I could do. And I know that. I know that what I witnessed could not have been prevented, could not have been interrupted, could not have ended differently, no matter what I did or didn't do in the 90 seconds between when it started and when it was over. But I still wake up at 3 a.m. I still see their backyard when I close my eyes. And I still hear the sound their daughter made. A sound I am never going to describe. A sound I would not repeat even if I could form the words. In the moments before everything went silent. The family moved in next to me in March of 2020. Husband, wife, and 2 kids. A boy around 12 and a girl around 9. Normal family, normal house. Normal yard separated from mine by a 6-foot wooden fence that I could see over if I stood on my back porch. For 18 months, nothing was unusual about them. The unusual part started in August of 2021. The husband came over one evening and asked if I had noticed anything strange in the neighborhood lately. I said no. He said he had been finding things in his backyard. Small things. Objects that didn't belong there. A child's shoe that wasn't his kid's. A broken watch. A cracked picture frame with no photo inside. He thought maybe animals were dragging things in from other yards. Or maybe kids from the neighborhood were playing pranks. He wasn't alarmed. Just curious. Just making conversation. I told him I hadn't seen anything. 2 weeks later, his wife knocked on my door at 7 a.m. She hadn't slept. I could see it in her face. She asked if I'd heard anything the night before, around 2 or 3 in the morning. I said no. She said she had woken up to a sound in their backyard. Not an animal, not wind, something else. And when she looked out the window, she saw someone standing near their fence line. Just standing there, facing the house. By the time her husband got downstairs with a flashlight, whoever it was had gone. I told her to call the police. She said her husband didn't want to bother them with what was probably nothing. It wasn't nothing. On September 3rd, 2021, at 11:47 p.m., I was on my back porch, smoking a cigarette I had promised my doctor I would quit. The night was warm, but there was something wrong with it. A stillness that didn't fit the season, to an absence of the usual background noise of crickets and distant traffic and dogs in other yards. The silence was specific. It was the silence of something waiting. I looked over the fence into their yard. Their porch light was on. The kitchen window was lit. I could see movement inside. The wife passing by the window, one of the kids at the table. Normal evening activity in a normal house on a normal street. And then every light in their house went out at once. Not a power outage. The street lights were still on. My house still had power. The houses across the street still glowed with the blue flicker of televisions. Just their house. Every light. Simultaneously. I stood up. I was about to call out, about to ask if they were okay, if they needed help, when their back door opened. The husband came out first, then the wife, Then both kids. They walked into their backyard in a single file line. They walked slowly. They did not speak. They did not look at each other. They walked to the center of the yard and stopped. And then they turned toward the back fence, the fence at the far end of their property, the one that bordered the empty lot behind the neighborhood. And they stood there, all four of them, facing the darkness beyond their property line. Stop. I need to step outside this story for a moment. Not to ask you a question, to tell you something. If you have someone you love, a spouse, a child, a parent, anyone, there will come a moment in your life when you see something happen to them that you cannot stop. An accident, an illness, a violence you did not see coming. And in that moment, you will have to find words. Words to tell them it will be okay. Words to tell someone else what you witnessed. Words to explain how the world broke in front of you, and you could not hold it together. I am telling you this because I need you to understand that what I saw next, what happened to that family in the 90 seconds after they turned toward that fence, took words away from me. It did not give me new words. It took the ones I had. If you had to tell someone you love about the worst thing you ever witnessed, what would you even say? I don't know what I would say. I don't have the words. What I have is what happened next. Something came over that back fence. I did not see it clearly. I will not pretend I did. I saw a shape, tall, wrong, moving in a way that did not match the physics of a human body. It came over that fence fast, and it moved toward the family faster, and in the space between one heartbeat and the next, it was among them. The wife screamed first, then the boy. Then, and this is the part I cannot say out loud, the part I will never repeat to anyone else. The girl made a sound that was not a scream. I ran inside. I grabbed my phone. I called 911. I was shouting so loud the dispatcher had to ask me 3 times to slow down. By the time I got back to the porch, their backyard was empty. No family, no figure, no sound. The police arrived in 8 minutes. They searched the yard, the house, the empty lot beyond the fence. They found signs of a struggle, overturned patio furniture, deep gouges in the lawn, a single child's shoe near the back fence. They never found the family. The case is still open. 2 years later. No bodies. No witnesses except me. No explanation for how a family of 4 could disappear from their own backyard in under 90 seconds without a single neighbor other than me hearing or seeing anything. I gave my statement. I described what I saw. The detective looked at me the way people look at someone they think might be lying or might be crazy or might be telling a truth too strange to accept. I have moved once since then. I do not live next to that house anymore. But there's one part of that night I have never told anyone. Not this part. Something else. Something about what I heard, or thought I heard, in the silence after they disappeared. A sound that came from the empty lot behind their fence. A sound that might have been a voice. A sound that might have been calling my name. Story 3. The work gloves were still on the ground where he left them. That was the first thing I saw. 2 leather gloves, palms up, fingers curled slightly inward, resting in the grass next to a wheelbarrow that had been there long enough for the tire to sink 3 inches into the soil. The grass had grown around the wheelbarrow's legs. The gloves had been rained on enough times that the leather had hardened and cracked, but they were still there, placed there, left there by someone who never came back to pick them up. I'm a landscaper. I've been doing this work for 11 years. I've cleared a lot of overgrown properties, foreclosures, estates, houses that sat vacant for years, while families fought over inheritance. You see a lot of strange things in abandoned yards. You learn not to let it bother you. But this property bothered me. The address was on the outskirts of a suburb that had been shrinking for 20 years. The house had been empty since 2020. The estate was tied up in probate. A lawyer had hired me to clear the backyard so the property could be photographed for sale. Standard job. 3 days of work, maybe 4. Cut back the overgrowth, haul away the debris, make it look like a place someone might want to live. I arrived on October 15th, 2023, alone. The lawyer had given me the gate code and told me no one else would be on the property. The backyard was bad. Not the worst I'd ever seen, but bad. Waist-high grass, thick brush along the fence line, vines climbing the back of the house and covering 2 of the ground floor windows. A wooden deck at the back of the house had partially collapsed, the boards rotting through and falling into the space beneath. And in the middle of the yard, surrounded by a circle of dead grass where nothing had grown in years, was a commercial-grade brush cutter. The kind I use, the kind that costs $3,000, the kind no landscaper would leave behind. Next to it, the wheelbarrow, the gloves, a rake with a broken handle, a Gatorade bottle, faded by sun, still half full of something that was no longer Gatorade, and a clipboard. I picked up the clipboard. The paper was water damaged, the ink faded, but I could still read most of it. It was a work order. Dated June 14th, 2020. The client's name matched the property address. The contractor's name was a company I recognized, a one-man operation like mine, run by a guy I had met once or twice at supply stores. The work order listed a 3-day job: clear the backyard, haul debris, standard terms. The completion date was blank. I stood there for a long time holding that clipboard. Then I called the lawyer who hired me and asked if he knew anything about a previous contractor on this property. He did not. I called the company listed on the work order. The number was disconnected. I searched online for the name on the clipboard. His business page had not been updated since June of 2020. His social media had no posts after June 12th, 2020. His last post was a check-in at a supply store 15 miles from where I was standing. 30 seconds. That's all I'm going to give you. Not a question. Not a hypothetical. Just 30 seconds to sit with what I just told you. You are standing alone in an overgrown backyard, and you have just discovered evidence that another person, someone who does exactly what you do for a living, came to this exact property 3 years ago and never finished the job. His equipment is still here. His work gloves are still on the ground. His name has vanished from everywhere you can find. 30 seconds. What do you reach for first, before you decide anything, before your brain catches up? What does your hand move toward? Your phone? Your keys? A tool? Count to 30. Whatever you chose, I chose different. I chose to search. I don't know why. Maybe because I needed to know. Maybe because he was someone who did what I did, who came to properties alone, who trusted that the job would be simple, and the yard would be empty, and nothing would go wrong. Maybe because if something happened to him here, I needed to know what it was before I spent 3 days in the same place. I started with the perimeter, walked the fence line, found nothing unusual, checked the collapsed deck, rotted wood, dead leaves, a family of raccoons that scattered when I shined my flashlight into the space below. Checked the brush along the back fence. Nothing. And then I noticed the smell. Not decay. Not animal rot. Something else. Something chemical and sweet. Like fertilizer mixed with something organic. Something that had been deliberately masked. The smell was coming from the southeast corner of the yard, where the brush was thickest, where the fence met a concrete retaining wall that separated this property from the drainage easement behind it. I pushed through the brush with a machete. Behind the brush, set into the retaining wall, was a metal access hatch, utility access, probably for the drainage system. The hatch was about 3 feet square, rusted around the edges, held closed by a padlock that had been cut. The padlock was lying on the ground. Next to it was another glove. Same leather, same style, same hardened, cracked condition as the pair in the middle of the yard. But this glove had something dark stained into the palm. I did not open the hatch. I backed out of the brush. I walked to my truck. I called the police. I told them what I had found. I told them about the name on the clipboard. I told them about the work order and the equipment and the glove with the stain. They came. They opened the hatch. They went inside. I was not present for what they found. I was in my truck, giving a statement to an officer, when I saw one of the cops who had gone into the drainage tunnel come back out and immediately double over at the edge of the yard. The detective who spoke to me an hour later told me only that they had found evidence of human remains. 3 weeks later, the dental records confirmed it was the man from the clipboard. But that is not the part that keeps me awake at night. The part that keeps me awake is what the detective told me during our second interview, when he was trying to establish a timeline. He said the medical examiner estimated the man had been dead for approximately 3 years. He said the cause of death could not be determined due to the condition of the remains. And then he said something that made me put down my coffee and ask him to repeat himself. He said the work order I found, the one dated June 14th, 2020, and the one with the contractor's name on it, was not the original contract for the property. The estate lawyer had pulled the records. There was a contract for landscaping work at that address, dated June 14th, 2020. But it wasn't with the man whose body they found. It was with a company that didn't exist. A company with no business registration, no tax records, no employees. A company that had submitted a bid, been awarded the contract, and sent a confirmation email that included a single line of instruction for the contractor. Bring your own tools. The previous worker left his behind. The name on that contract. I recognized it 3 days later. It was the name of a man who had died in that house in 2019. Before I go, the comments on this channel are different from most places online. People here say what they actually think. What are you thinking right now? Say it. Subscribe if you have not already. Notifications on. The next one is already being prepared. You will not want to find out about it late. If tonight meant something, if any of these hit somewhere real, leave a like before you go. It is the only way more people find this channel, and these stories deserve to be found. Every story I told you tonight happened in a backyard, not a forest, not an abandoned building, not somewhere far from home. A backyard. The place right behind the walls you sleep in. The place you see every day but never really look at. We think of our property as an extension of our safety. The fence as a boundary that separates what we control from what we don't. But these stories prove something different. The fence is not a wall, it's a frame. And sometimes, what's inside the frame was never yours to begin with.